Yo, we're back. Phil Gonzalez, Rich Ramirez. Wow. East Rosebud Studios, episode 4. You know, I mean, we try to do multiple episodes per week of whatever subject matter we're hashing it out here. And like I just mentioned to Lydia, our producer, on our break, I mean, you know, we've been yakking about this yet, and I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface of your career. I mean, this is we could talk all day, but you getting arrested on the Bighorn River and the ultimate court case that resulted from that arrest is really, that's the meat to really you in here today, mostly just because, and I mentioned this during the break, that you being arrested and this entire court case happening, it started as simply as you just wanting to fish a fly on the Bighorn River. I mean, you weren't down there to, you know, have a conflict where they were, right? I mean, they were in the sense that, you know, you showed me a photograph, and we'll have Lydia post that photograph. And that photograph was actually during your arrest, correct? Mm-hmm. But also the fact that the person that took the photograph was a Billings Gazette photographer at the time. What was his name? I'm sorry?
Larry Meyer.
Larry Meyer.
He had just hired on by the Gazette.
Okay.
And was down there that day just poking around.
But he went there and he got in their boat because he knew something was going to go down.
Well, he didn't know anything was going to go down. They invited him to jump in and go, and then from there it materialized. And fortunately, he was there and took pictures, and there it is.
Wow. Okay, so once the ruling came down that non-tribal people could legally fish the Bighorn River, did the number of participants on that river just like you could just see more and more and more and more people there? Did it have that impact immediately?
When that ruling came down, people have watched it from all around. Yeah. Okay. And instantly it became a famous watershed. Mm-hmm. Because it had never been fished, and it was, you know, it produced a lot of fishing. Yeah. And from that moment on, it became more and more valuable as far as a fishing place destination. You had issues with the western part of the state when their rivers were all blowing out. Yeah. Those guys would come over here and guide on the Bighorn. Yeah. And so it started getting crowded, and you know, and it brought a little bit of animosity, you might say, along with the decision, because people in the West started losing their clients to the Bighorn. Wow. They would say, why do we want to go fish over there when we catch these guys?
Were the fish big back then?
Yeah, they were, you know, believe it or not, the hybrids that was introduced, they only grew to about 22 inches. Wow. And then they would get a belly on them, you know. Yeah. And Wade told me one time that the life on the river of those fish was only 6 years compared to like 9 years on the Yellowstone or Madison. And the reason is because it had such a prolific insect life in there that they just gorged themselves. Brown trout, when they get to 16, 18 inches, they need to make a transition in their eating, what they're eating. And they're eating meat and potatoes. And there wasn't anything like that. The Bighorn doesn't have any sculpin in it or, you know, minnows of whatever.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so they start degrading, you know, falling down, and that's the end of it. But every now and then you'll catch a rainbow. In all my fishing years down there, which covers a span of 55 years, I've only caught 2 fish over 10 pounds. One was a rainbow and one was a brown trout.
So you caught a 10-pound, you've caught each a 10-pound brown trout and a 10-pound rainbow trout.
That was over, you know, it was 10, 11, whatever it was.
How long is a 10-pound brown on the Bighorn?
That one measured 29 3/4 inches.
What'd you catch it on?
On a streamer, a gonrite.
A gonrite. And you know, so talking about streamer patterns, were you a bug developer?
I've developed bugs, like I told you earlier. You just recreate.
Yeah.
But with my imagination, you never know what's going to come next.
How old were you when you got involved? How old were you when you got arrested?
That was in 78 or somewhere about in there. I don't know. I must have been in my early 30s.
Okay.
Something like that.
So, and then how long did it take for you to decide, I'm going to lay my professional stake on this river?
I really didn't have any inclination to doing that.
Okay.
It just happened.
Okay.
It was a lateral movement in my life. Prior to that, I was a mason, a bricklayer.
Okay.
And I had just gotten into the commercial phase of the industry.
Okay.
And I was on my way to Colstrip. I had the water treatment plant to build.
Yeah.
And I was out on the interstate, and I had had a new engine put in my truck, a 1 ton that I was pulling a 24-foot gooseneck trailer with backhoe, not a backhoe, but a forklift and, equipment. And I had another truck behind me, and the guy was flashing the lights at me, off and on, So I pulled over to see what he was wanting. He says, that truck's smoking really bad. He says, something's wrong. So I turned it off. And what had happened when they put the motor in, they scraped the side of the pan and it ruptured. And that little peephole oil was squirting out and hitting the manifold or the muffler. So I sent him to Billings to get me another pan gasket, and I hitched it right. This only happened 3 miles out of Huntley. At that time, Huntley had a little filling station.
Right.
A gentleman by the name of Pete DeGraff brazed it for me and took me back out.
Wow.
Well, I'm waiting. I get hit from behind by a semi-truck, and I'm on the other side of the white line on the highway.
Wow.
I go flying. I had my hands hooked like you do, with your thumbs, you know. And my feet were out because of the slope of the highway.
Yeah.
Next thing I know, I'm going flying. And I'm doing everything to keep my balance. And when I hit the ground, I turned around and I looked, and the truck was following me. And when that semi hit the back of my trailer, it crystallized the drive line on the pickup, on the 1 ton. And that was a Ford, and it had wishbone on the front. It popped the rivets on that, so the front end was freewheeling, and it just followed me down.
Wow.
From that accident, it put me in a situation where I had no longer the ability to work in that trade.
Wow.
And I've had 10 back operations from that incident.
Wow.
And that's when I made a lateral movement, and that was back in '89. I decided, I was married, I had 2 young kids. I had to do something.
Yeah.
And fishing was always my second job, I guess you might say. I remember one time my wife told me, she says, Phil, that river's your wife, and I'm just your, whatever she called it.
Yes, you are. I'm sorry.
But anyway, I decided then that I was going to do something, and it just happened by accident.
I mean, how'd you get the property?
I was just going to comment on that.
Okay.
I was sitting in, Bill Boyer was a real good friend of mine. We did a lot of fishing and hunting together. We'd go to Alaska every year and hunt and fish. We'd fish a week and hunt a week.
Wow. And
we'd go in September, because that's when season opened up there, and we would catch silvers and whatnot. And I was sitting in his office, and he had somebody on the phone and couldn't get off. Another one of the realtors in the office there tapped me on the shoulder, and I went out to see what he wanted. And he says, there's some land down there for sale. Do you know what land's worth? He says, I got to post it. And I told him, I said, depends where it's at. Wow. Anyway, he told me exactly the spot, and I knew that place. And today it's right below the 13-mile takeout.
Yeah.
Impulsively, I bought it. And
you bought that spot. And so, I mean, non-tribal people can buy?
The Crow Indian Reservation is what they call an open reservation.
Okay.
A closed reservation is like the Navajo and all that. The tribe owns all of that land, and none of the Indians themselves own partials.
Okay.
Where the Crow, they do.
Okay.
And I think the reason that happened is because they were scouts for the government when Custer met his Waterloo, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So they were granted. They had over 2 million acres
Wow.
on that reservation. Billings one time was on the reservation.
And it's interesting that you bring up, Custer, because, I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily associate the fact that, Custer's last stand, I mean, was, within a 45-minute to an hour drive of, the headwaters of the Bighorn River, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's possible that some of the rights that the Crow tribe has gotten from the U.S. federal government is because of how they helped the U.S. government when it came to, the Indian Wars.
Exactly.
Wow. Crazy.
So I bought that land from a non-Indian, and I bought 20 acres.
Yeah.
And it had a gravel pit off to the side,
Yeah.
And it was a pretty good sized hole. And when they used the gravel when they were building the dam,
Yeah.
and they'd taken and pushed all the topsoil, this big mound of dirt, topsoil, and here's this hole. And when I bought it, I had no intentions of doing I didn't even know why I purchased that piece of ground, but I did. And it was probably the best thing I ever did.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't purchase it to build on it? You
No.
just, okay, wow.
It wasn't until about a year later
Yeah.
that I finally decided I better do something with this,
Okay.
And a friend of mine owned the house. It's up on the road, and a spring goes through his property. And I called him and asked him if I could divert some of that spring water my way. Sure, go ahead. So I did, and I drove a stake on the bank where the lodge itself sits today. And I said, when the water level gets to the top of that, we better put the overflow in.
Yeah.
I had no idea if that hole was going to hold the water, because a lot of times that water will just seep through the ground and anticipate. But so the water level got up to that stake, and I called this contractor and told him, I said, it's time to put that overflow in. So we did, and today there's an 8-acre pond there that I stocked with rainbows, and later on I put largemouth bass in there.
And I knew there were bass in there too, yeah.
Yeah. And they're largemouth. They're fun on a fly rod.
Oh, man. Well, I'm a bass guy on a fly rod, big time.
So once that was developed, what are you going to do? I had him level that pad down.
Yep.
It took him 2 weeks to push it with a big old cat.
Yeah.
And level the pad, and that's where I built the lodge.
Wow.
And again...
And for those, not to interrupt you, Phil, but for those in our audience, all 20 of you, that are familiar with 13 Mile on the Bighorn River, and of course the Bighorn River Lodge, which is very obviously sitting there at 13 Mile, that's the building we're talking about. And that building today still services a ton of guided trips out of there. It's actually, from what I understand, one of the nicer lodges on the river. That's really, all because of you, Phil.
It's really interesting. That what I developed down there and created will never be duplicated.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. When I bought that property, I built the lodge 100 yards or better away from the river.
Yeah,
because I didn't want seepage or anything, to affect the river itself. And I've always been really careful of what I did down there, not to cause any damage or anything like that. So that being done, it sits in a location where nothing affects the river. Yeah. And through the years, I've been picked twice as being one of the top 10 best lodges in the West. Wow. Including Alaska. Wow. That's a mouthful.
Oh man, that's like that's. Oof.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot of. I got a lot of what I call ink, free ink.
For sure.
I've been written up several times and whatnot.
Who built it?
I did.
Oh wow.
I had a contractor it's a log lodge is what it is.
Wow.
And I built it all out of log.
Wow.
And it's really interesting. I watched those shops up in Fort Smith operate for 10 years. I could have bought any piece of property up there I wanted, because when the dam was done, all the workers left, and it was a ghost town.
Wow.
And the buildings that's there now were vacant. So, I'd been asked several times if I wanted to buy, like where the trout shop is today.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'd watched these guys operate for 10 years, and I did the exact opposite of what they were doing. And the end result is what's there today.
Oh, I think it's highly functional today, and I think it's beautiful today. And I mean, as far as actually a lodge on the water, it still is kind of like one of the only ones, one of the few ones. I mean, right?
Yeah, that being the case, the reason why I say that is because the tribal grounds that exist along the riverbank
Yes.
is owned by the tribe,
Okay.
and they won't sell any land.
Gotcha.
So access to that kind of a situation, having a pond like that, an 8-acre pond, stocked with your own fish.
Yeah.
And I did that just for my guests. They'd come off the river and they'd go out there and flog the water, and it was nice. It was fun.
Well, it to me, as somebody on the outside that basically has been fishing actively since about the mid-90s and so forth, it's hard to really explain what an incredible just beacon that lodge is on that river. I mean, you can imagine how many people have driven out a 13 mile in the last just 15 years. I mean, millions of people have literally driven out of that parking lot, and there is what you created through your career, right there. And that's a big compliment, because I've said it from the beginning, it's hard to make money in fly fishing, and people don't realize that.
Well, it is. The first year I was open, I was booked full.
Yeah.
Incredible. And not to put a negative outlook on the rest of the outfitting up there.
Yeah.
But the word got out that I was going to take everybody's business and, that kind of stuff. And jealousy stepped in.
Oh, man, I live it.
And
I live it.
I'm sure you do.
I do. I mean, I live it. I mean, and the funny thing about it is that, all you do is work hard. You don't have some big plan to screw anybody over or steal the market share or be the man. And yet, I've noticed in fly fishing, there's a lot of whiners.
Oh boy, did you hit that one on the head.
I mean, there's a lot of whiners. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's like they love you at first. And I don't know what it is about fly fishermen in general, but there's a lot of them that turn on you.
I had that happen at the very beginning. One of my closest friends turned on me. All because I built the lodge. Successful.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. I've been working, not the last year, but I mean, I've been open 17 summers, and I work 6 out of 7 days a week.
Well, the first day I walked through that door, and I met you.
Yeah.
Your persona, your kindness.
Thank you.
And just spoke volumes.
Well, thank you.
And I picked up on that right away.
I wish my ex-wives felt the same way.
I was making reference to my wife at that time.
Okay.
Saying that the river was my wife and she was just my mistress.
Oh, I love that.
And
I love that.
I've never forgotten that, but I think, she's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, my soon-to-be ex, I hate to admit that, but my soon-to-be ex literally said to me, if you're not at that damn store, you got to be fishing. I thought about that for a second because, that's not a compliment, right? But she's right. And that's kind of what I think that, like, people that aren't in the industry who are still passionate and love fly fishing, they don't realize that when you're in the business, it has its consequences.
Good or bad.
Yep. I mean, it just has its consequences because what we do, we love, and what we do, we're passionate about, and what we do, we're lucky to be able to do professionally.
That's
but
true.
As you know, with customers that you've had and that I've got, this just becomes all consuming.
Well, you can imagine what I've experienced.
Wow.
As the years grew on and I became more and more known out there, you get away from the nucleus of Fort Smith or buildings and all that.
Yeah.
There's people right there, you hit it on the head. People that hate you, they don't like you, they talk bad about you.
Yeah, I mean,
But go outside of that you're a different person in the eyes of the
It's true. I mean,
industry.
and I love how you stipulate that, because within your world and your marketplace. But you know what's the strangest thing about fly fishing? And I just you can tell me if you felt this or not. But I've never been involved in any industry where you can piss people off for not doing a damn thing.
That's true. I've had guys out on the river with a guide say, "Does Phil even know how to fish?" You know, and like I say,
wow,
I'd gotten bad mouth so many times
Yeah.
in so many different ways.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I'm no Phil Gonzalez, that's for sure, but it's amazing to me how people have left my shop as customers. And I know they have, because you don't see them anymore, or you hear this or you hear that or whatever. And you know what's weird? Is that happens. And I've never had an ill word with them.
I don't see that in you anyway. It's their fault.
Oh, I
It's
know.
not yours.
Well, I'm trying to break down the psychology of a fly angler. That to me is, what is that? What is it about our industry?
The number one thing that you need to realize is jealousy.
Yeah.
That's all it is jealousy.
Wow.
You can't believe the number of people that
Wow.
don't even know me that hate me.
Wow.
I was
This is heavy now.
I was in the Bighorn fly shop there. Mm-hmm. I walked in there because since I sold the lodge, I still buy flies, and I always did.
Well, yeah, you're a good customer here.
And I was over at the fly box, and there was a guy up at the counter, and I overheard him saying something about Phil Gonzalez. And the guy was putting trash on me, you know. He was trashing my name and just me in general.
Yeah. Wow.
And I stood and listened to that, and Hale Harris looked at me, and he kind of had this, you know, that look on his face.
Awkward.
Yes, to say the least.
Awkward.
So I walked over to that guy, and I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Hi, how you doing?" He turned around, he saw me, and I said, stuck my hand out, and I said, "Hi, I'm Phil Gonzalez." That guy would not shake my hand. He turned around and exited, and I ain't seen him since. But he was in there putting word on him.
Yeah, it's kind of I don't know. It surprised me because, you know, prior to me getting into the fly fishing industry, you know, I've been around. I've made some money. I've had some professional success, and in whatever industry I used to work in, I just personally, I never found it to be so backbiting as fly fishing. And I've sat up at night wondering, okay, what is it about the animal, the psychology behind a fly angler that makes some of them this way? And I think you nailed it. It's freaking jealousy.
That's all it is.
Because nothing could be so petty like that. And that's what they're demonstrating with that, right?
You know, when you see another individual's success at something that he loves, it draws a negative
Good point.
a negative reaction to you. Guys will walk up to you and pat you on the back, but they'd rather stick you in the back, stab you in the back than pat you.
And I mean, and the thing about it is, you know, what did I say at the beginning of episode 1? I said that it's hard to make money in this business. But I think people think that, you know, they think that it's easy. Because it's fishing, it's easy. I think that they think that because all I do is sell Royal Wolf flies for a living, that it's easy. But, you know, sitting across from this table with you, you're one of the rare people that can walk through this shop as a, you know, comrade of mine and really understand that the last thing it is easy. The last thing that this is easy.
You know, I commented this morning to your helper.
The lovely Lydia.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I told her, I said, "Is there anything that you don't have in here that somebody asks they want?" She said, "No, he's got everything, but he doesn't have enough." Well, that tells me you're successful.
I mean,
I saw that right away.
Thank you, Phil.
And
thank you.
I've been in, I can't begin to tell you how many fly shops I've been in.
Hundreds.
South America.
Sure.
Mexico, Canada.
Yeah.
Belize.
Yeah.
Chile.
You've been everywhere.
I've been everywhere.
Yeah.
In those areas, and I have yet to run into a fly shop as nice as this one. And I told you one time.
I put it all into it.
I told you one time there's a place that you represent Montana with, and that's the fly shop in Key West.
Wow.
Wide World Sportsman.
Wow.
And
That means a lot, man.
They have the Peel-Off, which is the boat that
Yes.
Hemingway fished in.
Wow. Literally the one.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
hanging from the ceiling.
Jeez.
And it is an absolute beautiful place.
Whew. Wow.
But what you've created here, again, I'll say this, will never be duplicated.
I would agree. Thank you. Well, it cost me 2 marriages,
Well,
and it was worth losing them both.
I can't comment on that. All I can do is agree with you.
It was worth it. Holy crap.
I look back real quick in
Yeah.
my life. And I know what you're saying.
God.
I went through the whole rigmarole.
Oh
as you
boy,
have.
man. What a combine of life, huh? Well, I thank you. You made my day. I was late to the interview, and I apologize for that. Thank you for holding me accountable by making me clean up my act for a broadcast.
Well, it's one of those things where I enjoy people.
Yes.
And personally myself, I grew up in a different era than you did.
Yes.
I don't even think-
Yes.
How old are you?
I'm 58.
Okay. I was born in 47.
Yeah.
And so it gives you an idea of the generation that I grew up
Yes. Yes. Of
And-
course.
We always respected the other person.
Yeah.
And I live with that. And that's something that my dad
It's good to live
fused
with,
into.
and I learned something from it today.
Well, we all learn,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for everything. Thank you for the friendship, and thank you for the information. We'll have you back because the bottom line is, we just did, 4 15-minute plus segments of this broadcast, and the truth is, you could do 100 with your life when it comes to fly fishing.
Well,
We didn't talk about you rubbing elbows with celebrities, which you've taken a ton of people that are well-known fishing, correct?
yeah, I have.
Let alone your travel fishing with a fly when really the travel wasn't there like it is now. Now there's no part of the globe you can't travel to with Yellow Dog or whoever to go fish somewhere. But back when you were doing it, you were really pioneering it. And I know you've got some fascinating stories about some of the people that you fished with. So we'll talk about that next time, okay?
All right, I'm game.
Okay, Phil Gonzalez, thank you so much.
And I appreciate you having me here today.
It's an absolute honor.
You're a
sir.
good man.
It's an honor. Okay. Well, the haters don't think so, but the haters kind of fill our tank, don't they?
But remember one thing, Rich.
Yeah.
As long as they're talking about you,
Yeah.
they're leaving somebody else alone.
That's poetry, baby. That's poetry. Thank you, Phil. This is Rich Ramirez from East Rosebud Studio signing off. Thank you for listening. We're out. Bye.